Hey guys, Ryan here, and let's finish talking about the Zords of Power Rangers Turbo. Turbo was an interesting season for Zords. As I've mentioned before, I think it helped establish a sort of continuity blueprint that they refer back to continuously across future seasons. Robo Racer and Artillatron are actually both quite good examples of this. Robo Racer gives us lights and sounds in a Zord again, our first since Tour the Shuttle Zord back in Season 2. Bandai America took the electronics out of Falcon Zord in Season 3 and return of Titanus' Dragon Zord chestplate in the same year. And there were no lights or sounds in any of the Zeo Zords, although Red Battle Zord had its punching ability. But maybe now they only have a small Zord to offer, they can see the value of it again. So here we go. And they actually changed it majorly from how it worked in Japan. And to be honest, on this occasion, I'm really glad they did. And then we have Artillatron, self-described on the box as the Turbo Transport. Don't mix it up with an Ultra Zord. I actually had Artillatron beside my TV subwoofer the other day, and they were about the same size. They're both very much box-like. Let's venture on to talk about the toy history then. And released in Japan in 1996 as Sirender and in 1997 as Robo Racer, the Zord of the Blue Senturion is a police car with its own battle mode or high stance mode, whatever you want to call it. Megazord mode probably isn't accurate given how short this thing is. Artillatron in its native Japan was known as VicTrailer and was the Zord of the Phantom Ranger. VicTrailer helping explain the V and VRVs all over it, and its tie-in with the Turbo Rescue Megazord, they're known as VRV Robo. I wonder as well if Vic is meant to represent victory, which this thing would bring because of its impressive firepower. Here's a fun fact, it was never actually referred to by name in the series Power Rangers Turbo. That's how ultimately inconsequential this thing was. I find both releases quite strange in that they sit on the periphery away from the main Power Rangers Turbo Megazords. I wouldn't say that either are necessarily must-haves from the season, but they are interesting in that they don't follow the usual type. Let's talk the design. So Robo Racer is a police car that turns into a police officer robot. I feel like Racer is a bit of an inaccurate name, perhaps meant to make it seem more appealing to kids. It's certainly not a race car, it's a police car. I guess they gotta throw some alliteration in there when they don't really know what to do with it though. Artillatron, meanwhile, is a giant wheeling storage vehicle. It's a box on wheels. Obviously they form the 11th and 12th car-themed Zord in a season comprised fully of car-themed Zords, and I think the Robo Racer actually is more impressive in how sleek it is in its car mode, and actually its Zord mode is quite nice as well. Artillatron though, now this is difficult because there's not much of a design to it. It's literally just these storage units stacked up. It's got its own kind of separate headpiece and arms, which kind of help give it more of a robotic form. But I feel like they're kind of cheats because they're not really part of the main structure of the Zord itself. The sizing of both is quite strange as well, like Robo Racer is really short, Artillatron is really big and very mass heavy. It's strange that Turbo had no 6 Ranger, but these kind of 2 extra Ranger helpers who would appear from time to time, but never actually being established as full-time members of the team. And their Zords kind of fit in with that. They have these extra components which you don't really need. What's different to the originals then? Well, as mentioned, the electronics of Robo Racer were altered heavily from the Japanese version, which included a whistle, and the Zord itself was actually whistle sensitive. That's what made the sirens come on. Luckily for America, they changed it to a button. Now I'm pleased about this because I bought these 2 used, and I really would not want to put a whistle that had been in someone else's mouth in mine. So yeah, I'm glad that it's just a button. Also, surely a whistle accessory is just something else to lose, and something that you don't ultimately need. In terms of the production of these toys, it's actually a new classic Bandai America year following on from Zeo. The stickers are consistent with what they got in Japan, which is great, and in this department at least you get exactly what you need. Where they hold back though is on paint, and where they cheap out is on chrome. Quite awkwardly, Artillatron's front section has its 4 wheels painted in chrome, but the 10 back ones don't get the same treatment like they do in Japan. Fortunately, as I've recently discovered, you can resolve this yourself with a liquid chrome pen. Now all 14 wheels have the nice silver chrome effect, and I think it does help bring a bit more distinction to what is otherwise quite a plain Zord. Also, in answer to a recent question about how I painted the wheels on the Turbo Zords, really carefully is the answer. I recommend using a toothpick if you can, because it gives you the fine point to reach those finer details without it getting out of control, and the wood seems to work with the paint really well. Since my Turbo Rescue review, I've actually painted the wheels on the red, blue and pink Zords, the same metallic silver that I painted the Turbo Zord wheels. It feels much more consistent now they all have two colours on their wheels, and I think it looks all the better for it. What's bad about them then? Well, Robo Racer's size, a bit annoying. It stands just over half the height of a Megazord and about a third bigger than the Turbo Zords in their car mode or the Rescue Zords in their high stance mode. So ultimately it doesn't really fit in anywhere, as demonstrated by it not even having a place in Artillatron either. In fact, the only place where it did have somewhere carved out for it was a bay in the Turbo Garage playset. I look at these things and I do struggle to wonder just what is ultimately the point of them. Robo Racer in particular feels like he's from a completely different series, with his handcuffs, riot shield and police emblems adorning it. It literally should be in Power Rangers SPD. I don't know how to describe the transformation of Artillatron. I feel like boring is almost too harsh. Basic perhaps, but hasn't each season got one like this? Tour the Shuttle Zord from Season 2, Ninja from Season 3, Auric the Conqueror from Season 4. There's always one Zord where the transformation is just not as fun as the others, and unfortunately for Artillatron it's definitely this. Despite being seen to transform in the background of the Turbo Rescue Zords in Turbo, it was never actually shown to fight in its warrior mode in Turbo. I think future Carrier Zords do much more with this idea, but this is basically just a lorry that stacks up on top of itself, and I think they just hope that kids won't notice and just enjoy that they've got a bigger Zord for smaller Zords to ride in. Also, these Zords do not fit snugly in their containers, whereas the future Super Train Megazord would resolve this with good-sized housing, and Pyramidus, for the most part, at least had well thought out places in both its modes for the Zeo Zords. This has such ill-defined, large, boxy spaces that they rattle about inside it, and you can actually store Robo Racer inside Artillatron along with the Turbo Megazord. There's that much additional space there. What's good about them then? Note I did not say great. Well, the Robo Racer transformation is actually really fun, and I think probably the best mode-to-mode single Zord transformation out of the 7 options in the Turbo season. It's both a really satisfying transformation, and it's one that you can actually work out yourself without needing instructions. There's a lot of nice details, like the headlight sirens folding 90 degrees and it having an additional helmet over its robo face. That's quite fun, as is the fact that you get so many accessories with this. You can go with its double-bladed action, its handcuffs, its riot shield, or its blaster. Or a combination of the 5, which is just nuts. It's a shame that it can't wield more than 2 at a time, but it might look a little over the top if you did. Anyway, I'm supposed to be thinking positively in this part. What's good about Artillatron? Well, it was quite a fun example of a Carrier Zord which could become its own sort of Megazord. And the idea of a trailer transporting smaller vehicles is actually quite a fun one in a way. I think you probably have to be a bit younger to appreciate it, maybe. Also, you get a combination of sorts in a season that's very lax on them. You can use either the Turbo or the Turbo Rescue Megazord and Artillatron's arms to give it artillery power. And this is about the most mixed up thing you can do from the Season 5 toy line. Something that's worth knowing about the Turbo Rescue Megazord is that there are little clips on the Red Fire Tamer Zord which will guide the artillery cannons in and stop the sagging effect from the extra weight stressing the arm peg. Yeah, the Turbo Rescue Megazord is definitely punching above its weight with these big guns. Unfortunately, the Turbo Megazord doesn't have these clips, so you've just got to kind of feel it out and hope that it doesn't collapse. The slightly annoying thing about the artillery power is that the handles have these sort of stoppers which will stop them from going any further into the Megazord's hands. So the connection in the hands is actually a lot shallower than you want it to be, but there must be some reason for this. So to conclude the Turbo toy line and kind of how it inspires future seasons, well, In Space changes the numbering up again. But for the most part, Turbo kind of sets the Ranger numbering system of red being 1, blue being 2, green being 3, yellow being 4, pink being 5. That's something that we hadn't seen before, and that still carries through to this day. Turbo was also a season that really gave us Zords, where the primary colours of the main 5 Zords were actually the colours of the Ranger colours, apart from obviously pink Rangers being white. We would notably get this again in most 5 Ranger Megazords going forward, with odd exceptions like Time Force. But when you think about how blue the Zeo Megazord was, and how black the Shogun and Thunder Megazords were, it's strange that it's taken us this long to get to the point where we can have a Megazord comprised of the Ranger's colours, rather than a block colour theme. Also, allowing die-cast metal onto a Megazord toy by Bandai America became a bit more regular over the next half a decade in Lightspeed Omega Megazord, Time Force Megazord, and Time Shadow, Wild Force Megazord. It's fun that metal kind of starts to show up. Bit surprising that Turbo's the season to do it. The Rescue Zords and Artillatron, this was actually a big step and actually harkened back into older Sentai's roots, Zords that could be transported into battle inside of a big carrier Zord. I know Pyramidas kind of had that, but they actually went in at the end of the fight and weren't transported into battle, and also there were gaps in the back panelling. Also, they didn't come out very elegantly and they had to go into it in reverse. We will see a strategy similar to this again, I believe done far better, with Super Train Megazord, where their own Rescue Zords are a bit smaller and don't convert into a secondary mode. But some might say the high stance mode isn't perfect in the first place, and it's better to just have one good use rather than 2 okay ones. Neither of the Bandais gave us a full-size Zenith Carrier Zord in Lost Galaxy, or the Brachio Zord from Dino Thunder, although Japan gave them a smaller playset-sized version. But the SPD Command Center base was the next after Lightspeed to nail the idea of a deployment Zord, which could also be turned into its own Megazord. A lot of these vehicle themes we do see in some form again. Obviously, rescue vehicles appear very soon down the road. But even the Robo Racer and the Siren Blaster remind me of SPD and their police theme. Operation Overdrive is the next fully cars-based season, but there is a slight simplistic elegance to the Turbo Zords, which I don't think is really present there. It's definitely an early step into cars-based mecha, even though for Japan it was their second Sentai to do so. Not all elements from Turbo are positive. There's obviously no Ultra Zord mode. You can tell Bandai America don't enjoy this particular aspect either. The last time this happened in the show, they manufactured their own revision of Titanus and shot toy-specific footage of it. Obviously Titanus wasn't going to bail them out in a season that already had a large carrier Zord, but it would again next season for the In Space as a Toyline exclusive sold in America. But we are actually, from here on out, in a time when Ultra Zords just won't be a thing for a while. I guess after the 6-item toyline of Zeo and the 2 Ultra Zord modes of Pyramidas, there wasn't really any ground left to cover. Or perhaps it was Bandai Japan and possibly America observing slowing sales on the big ticket Zords, and that made them an obvious choice to be the first to go. As some of you who have watched my Toy Regrets video will know, I'm sad I don't have the Turbo Garage. I feel like that as a playset really helped bring the season together, but hey, maybe one day. Another thing I'm left wondering from Turbo is, why did they stop putting effort into combinations? They did, I suppose, move their challenge into a completely different realm, and each year, if you think about it, has had a challenge which we haven't seen before. They try and give us something new. In Season 1, it was an Ultra Zord. In Season 2, it was a Zord that changed modes and also wore other Zords like armour. In Season 3, it was Humanoid Warriors, 2 sets, one of which formed a Megazord. In Season 4, it was the Ultra Zord with 2 modes. And now in Season 5, it's a triple transforming Megazord. But otherwise, it's just cars as the challenge all season, and while Robo Racer is a great example of one, Artillatron is not. Maybe I'm underappreciating the effort involved in how this thing was put together, but it just doesn't seem as interesting. What do you guys think of the Turbo Zords then? I think they photograph really nicely, and as toys they certainly feel really good quality. It's just what they can do together leaves you wanting more. So that was the Rangers' last Earth-based Zord line of the Zordon era. Even in the show they seemed to want out because the majority of the last episode of the season was about convincing their fictional NASA equivalent known as Nasada to let them use a shuttle and jettison away from the Earth to try and get help. And that's where we're going next time, in space. Do follow me on Instagram, I'm at powerrangergram. If this has seemed useful to you and you want to see more like it, then why not subscribe? That's it for now, and until the next time, see you later.